Let's change that quick. Specials and I think that's for the Circa video. I think we have to do the MGM one, right?
Yes.
There we go. There we go. All right, there it is. And nobody's on the live yet, so that's good. Welcome into the NFL Week 3 edition of the RotoWire Sports Betting Pod. Of course, a subsidiary of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We hope you'll follow us along throughout the NFL season as we take you through each slate every single week. I am Nick Whalen, joined, as always, by my trusty confidant, John McKechnie. John, it was fantastic hanging with you down in Myrtle Beach last week. As promised, we did get to watch the Thursday night game together. However, the TV at our Airbnb did not work. I don't know what year it was from. It looked much newer than it was. It did not have the inputs we needed. So it was great to huddle around an iPad and struggle to stream that Vikings-Eagles game with you.
Yes, likewise, that was a joy, kind of a gritty football watching experience in what was otherwise like the least gritty weekend of all time, just being on the beach in Myrtle in this great spot. But yeah, that TV, not really set up for modern streaming or viewing, but it definitely had the red, yellow, white cords, so if you needed to hook up your PlayStation 2, we were in good shape in that sense.
Yeah, that was no problem whatsoever. But some great golf was played. Maybe I'll do like a Rosillo style travel log episode someday, just detailing the events of Myrtle Beach. But heck of a time celebrating my pending nuptials. But that's in the past, John. We got to move on. One thing we know about NFL handicapping, you got to have a short memory. We went 1-2-2 in the Circa contest last week. Didn't feel good about it. 2 brutal pushes. We had the Packers at +1. They, of course, blow a 12-point fourth quarter lead, end up pushing that one. The Saints give up a late touchdown to Carolina.
An octopus to Adam Thielen.
Just back-breaking 2-point conversion. I got yelled at by my fiance for punching the couch after that 2-point conversion. Like Bryce Young's rolling out. I'm thinking he's got nothing. They're closing in, throws it across his body. I think it was Thielen who had the grab. So 2 pushes there on what really felt like games we were going to take home. John, we missed on the Bengals. We were on Cincinnati to win that game. I think we had them at 3.5. You were all over Cincinnati. Not to toss the blame on you here, but your Ravens are involved. So what happened here? I mean, obviously there's a whole new narrative with Cincinnati with Joe Burrow and whether or not he's going to play. We'll get into that as they face the Rams on Monday night. But this Bengals team's in trouble all of a sudden.
Yes, they are. The Ravens had a really good defensive game plan where they were just kind of dogged about pressing the receivers off the line and not letting Jamar Chase and T. Higgins get those free releases. And that just kind of threw them off their game. And then, for Baltimore's part on the offensive side, absolutely textbook opening drive. The script from Monken was about as good as you're going to do, a great mix of running and passing. And then, for the Ravens having being down Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum, lowest pressure rate in Lamar Jackson's career. So that line held really nicely. And they also ran for almost 180 yards combined on the Bengals with that kind of ragtag bunch up front. So, I mean, that points a lot of issues at Cincinnati beyond just Joe Burrow being dinged up. I think that defensive front seems to be able to be moved around. And, I'm not throwing any shade at Chase and Higgins, of course, but there's, but it just goes to show that a well-executed game plan that's well thought out can occasionally, keep a lid on star talent such as that. And that's what we saw last Sunday. So, like you're alluding to there with the Bengals, they got those issues. And now Burrow, the calf seems to be an issue that is carrying on into the season. We don't know if he's going to be out there on Monday night. And, we might see some Jake Browning action. I haven't been interested in seeing Jake Browning since 2016 when he was at Washington. So we could be treated to kind of I love the concept of a Monday night doubleheader, but if one of those games is bad, but at least that would be an improvement over last week in which both games were bad.
They sure were. They were sloppy. They were bad all around. We'll get to all the teams that were involved in that just collective car crash that was Monday Night Football. Bengals holding as 3-point favorites, and we'll get to that game in a little more depth later on. But interesting with Joe Burrow not participating in practice at all this week. Did not practice on Thursday as we record, excuse me, on Friday morning. I like the Monday night doubleheaders, by the way. I just wish it was a true doubleheader. Like I like staying up late. I like having football that goes at 12:30 in the morning. Like I'm conditioned for this for NBA basketball, right? You have those you got those like Clippers Rockets games that start at 9:30 my time and go until 12:15, 12:30 in the morning. Like I don't mind the overlap, but I would rather that we actually stack these games up together, right? Like have them actually go back to back instead of all this overlap.
Right. And the amount of overlap, like you only really get like 1/4 of a solo game. And then you're kind of having to really pay attention. It's like, I'm spent from being the remotesman on Sunday. Like Monday night, I should be on easy mode. Like let me just kind of vegetate, Sunday I'm very active. Commercial break. If I smell a commercial break, we're off to the next thing. But yeah, Monday night with that setup, it's tough. You really do have to be locked in and bouncing around between the two games. And at least we got week 2 out of the way. So I think this week we'll be able to kind of manage the game flow on our end a little bit better.
Okay, let's get to the slate here. We'll work through every game on the Sunday slate. If you want a recap of Giants 49ers, first of all, there wasn't a whole lot to see there. I think that one played out about as we expected. You can find that on the various RotoWire podcast YouTube channels. Jim Coventry will be all over that today, I'm sure, somewhere. But we will work our way through the slate. And, John, you have 3 games highlighted as your best of the weekend. Tell me which one you're most looking forward to. We'll start there.
So not completely unlike college football week 3, where there was not a whole lot to love to the casual. This week 3 in the NFL is it's a little bit bereft of the marquee matchup, but that's okay. There's still a handful of games here that I really find interesting, both for narrative purposes for how the seasons are going to unfold for these respective teams and for betting purposes. And I would start with Green Bay versus New Orleans. I also think Detroit, Atlanta is going to be a really, really interesting one, and Minnesota versus the Chargers. 2 teams really looking to get off the schneid, avoid that dreaded 0-3 start. But if you want to get things rolling here, let's take a look at what's happening in Green Bay on Sunday with the Saints coming in 2-0, but not the most impressive 2-0 that we've ever seen. The Green Bay Packers 1.5-point favorites at home in this one.
Yeah, you'll see that number at 1 in some places. I believe it locked at 2 in the Circa contest, so we'll have to discuss that before we officially submit our entries this weekend. This one is tough because for Green Bay, yet again, we have several key offensive players who we're not sure if they're going to be on the field. Aaron Jones seems to be moving in the right direction. Same with Christian Watson. They're saying no setback for Christian Watson, although he did not practice on Thursday. Sounds like they're just taking it easy with him. To me, that seems like a 60-40 situation, maybe in favor of him making his debut. Aaron Jones probably closer to 50-50. David Bakhtiari is also in that. It feels like he's just going to be a 50-50 call week to week going forward. And then we know for sure that Elton Jenkins will not be out there for Green Bay. So we saw, basically by the end of the second quarter last week against Atlanta, Green Bay was down. You could say it's 4 best offensive players. So that one, it throws this one into a bit of a tizzy for me. I mean, we've seen the New Orleans offense basically play the same game twice in a row, right down to the long pass to Rashid Shaheed to kind of seal the game late. Total in this one sitting at 42.5. I think that seems about right. I do worry about the Packers' offensive line. I do worry about the Packers' running game, especially if Aaron Jones is unable to go. A.J. Dillon's not giving them anything. He was a disaster. He was also responsible for injuring Elton Jenkins. I don't know if you've seen the play, but Dillon just ran right into him, basically kneed him in the back of Jenkins' knee, resulted in an MCL injury. So we're very low right now on A.J. Dillon. This is a game where certainly we'll be staying away from it in Circa. I would recommend doing the same if you're trying to put together, some sort of, parlays, anything like that. I kind of just default to the home team here. I really like what I've seen from Jordan Love so far. They're asking him to make a lot of difficult throws. There have not been a lot of wide open men for Jordan Love, but depending on what metric you look at, some will tell you that he's like the 25th best quarterback in the league. Some will tell you that he's like a borderline top 10 quarterback. 2 games into his actual starting tenure with the Packers, I feel pretty good about what he's given them so far. So based on how much the Saints offense has struggled, and by the way, they're still down Alvin Kamara. They'll likely be down Jamal Williams in this game as well. I don't know if he's officially ruled out, but he's not going to play. So they have some key injuries as well. That number's pretty low on the total. I don't know if I would really touch that, but this is one where I probably just default to the home team.
I'm on the Packers here as well, but one last thing to consider with the run game being what it is for New Orleans right now, again, with Jamal Williams dealing with that injury, Kamara still sidelined, suspended. Do we think that skews things heavily towards the pass here for New Orleans? And with that, are you worried at all about this Packers secondary getting tested, upwards of 35, 40 times?
I'm very worried about it. Yeah, because Darnell Savage is a part of that Packers pass defense, and Joe Barry is at the controls of this Packers defense. And, we saw him on a 3rd and 3 put Devondre Campbell 15 yards off of Bijan Robinson. And how do you think that ended up going? So, yeah, the coordinator thing to me is just baffling. To me, that was the most surprising retention of any quarterback or any coordinator, maybe other than Matt Canada. The Packers pass defense just hasn't really been tested quite yet. Such a unique matchup last week against Desmond Ridder. Obviously, a disaster for Justin Fields in week 1. So, a lot of the numbers will say the Green Bay pass defense looks great. But to me, I think those are skewed because of what happened in week 1. So I don't really know what to expect from Green Bay on defense. I'm usually not optimistic when we're talking about Joe Barry. But I'm with you here. I think I lean Green Bay ever so slightly. It's going to be a low number in the pick'em pool. I'll tell you that for sure. Let's go to Detroit and Atlanta. Very interesting matchup here. We have some injuries that we're monitoring on the Detroit side. They will, of course, be without C.J. Gardner-Johnson on defense. That's a pretty big deal for a defense that has certainly struggled last year. That was one of their big free agent additions. Amon-Ra St. Brown is banged up. Josh Reynolds is banged up. David Montgomery will likely not play in this game. Their left tackle, Taylor Decker, also banged up. Vaitai suffered that scary injury last week. I don't know if he's going to play. I like Atlanta to do what it's done these first 2 weeks, and this will be probably their most difficult matchup going on the road at Detroit. Lions are 3-point favorites, totals 46.5. But in each of their first 2 games, we've seen the Atlanta Falcons just dominate time of possession.
I like the Falcons here a lot. And a side comment on CJ Gardner-Johnson. I would like to see him sort of with like the Hugh Freeze model of just like being on the sidelines or in the press box in the bed, but he's got the ski mask on because he was driving that ship last week. But Atlanta they look like they're no fun to play. I mean, they're Arthur Smith cut from the Mike Vrabel cloth, and despite his persistent middle finger to fantasy managers everywhere, the Falcons come ready to play every single Sunday, and I think their physicality it puts them in a really good position against a Detroit defense that I think is a little bit lacking in that front seven. We'll see if the passing game can at least pose a credible threat. And again, against a banged up secondary, that should help things a little bit here. So I think the Falcons are a lively road dog here. I wouldn't be shocked if they get the win, and I do like them to cover.
Yeah, if you could find that number at 3.5, I would absolutely jump on the Atlanta Falcons. I know it was at 3.5 at some books earlier this week. I'm seeing it at 3 across the board. And by the way, we have a great page over at RotoWire. If you just go to our NFL betting section, you can see all of the odds, money line, spreads, totals. Kind of give you examples of if you bet this, here's what you win. And you can compare, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, PointsBet, all of those sports books on one page. So it's a great way to do some easy line shopping every single week. Yeah, at 3, it's probably a stay away for me. I think this could be a 3-point game, especially if Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's going to play. But we've also seen him, in this situation before where he suits up, he plays, and then he's kind of in and out of the game. That was the case last week as well. You take him away from this offense, and I think all of a sudden you're kind of devoid of major playmakers. The question is, do we see more Jahmyr Gibbs? Like if they finally unleash Jahmyr Gibbs in this game, I think it kind of could come down to like a battle of the rookie running backs.
I'm thinking no. I think Dan Campbell, despite here's your sign to let Jahmyr Gibbs, let it rip and get him, 20 touches in this game. I feel like we're going to see his role stay relatively the same, maybe a couple more touches here. But I think that we're going to see Craig Reynolds basically 1-to-1 take over the David Montgomery role, probably not do as well in it as Montgomery. And that, that doesn't bode overly well, I suppose. But I think on the frustrating angle, I do think that Jahmyr Gibbs kind of stays within that current role that he's in. And I could see Bijan on the other side of this getting unleashed even more. We started to see it more last week after some week one panic. I do like Bijan to go off a bit in this one.
Love Bijan Robinson over 23.5 receiving yards in this game. His rushing prop, John, sits at 67.5. I like the receiving prop more. I really like both of those. I mean, Detroit, PFF has Detroit as the worst tackling team in the league so far. That is an absolute disaster stat if you're going against Bijan Robinson, who might be the best tackle breaker or tackle eluder in the NFL right now. Minnesota and the LA Chargers, John. That's the other game that you have circled as one of your favorites of the week. I'm with you on that. I mean, we have so many big spreads this week. A lot of good team versus bad team matchups. This is as close as it gets, right? I mean, you're going to see this spread at 1 at some books, 1.5 at others. I know 1 is the number at the DK Sportsbook. I believe it locked at 1 in Circa as well. Is this a loser leaves town match in week 3? This feels like whichever team comes out of this 0-3, unless we get a tie, John, that team is going to be panicking.
Yes. So it definitely is. The stakes are high. These are 2 playoff teams from a year ago that have gotten off to bad starts. In the Chargers case, they have played 2 good teams, or 2 pretty good teams. The Dolphins definitely good, and the Titans tough to beat them in Tennessee. And then on the other side, Minnesota, they had the head scratching loss to open things up, but I thought that they at least comported themselves reasonably well against Philadelphia last week. They're at home. When we were talking about the Tennessee Chargers game last week, I was like, I just cannot trust Brandon Staley whatsoever, and the numbers do back that up. Since Staley took over in 2021, the Chargers are 7-12 against the spread on the road. So that's a pretty, significant figure in my opinion. Pretty good sample there at 19. So I'm on the Vikings. I think that, what we were talking about where the Falcons are physical, the Lions are bad at tackling. I feel like there's a similar mismatch potentially at play here where the Vikings, they have that explosive passing attack. They have Justin Jefferson, of course. Jordan Addison continues to get better every single week. And that Chargers secondary is a problem, and not in like the cool way the kids are saying it right now, like they're a problem. Like, no, like it's an actual problem. For the Chargers. So this being on turf in the Dome, Kirk at home, I'm liking the Vikings here.
It's also a day game, which is huge for Kirk Cousins. I remain convinced that the Chargers are the better team here. We should also mention that Austin Eckler has not practiced all week. We have the, he's ready when he's ready, basically, quote from Brandon Staley. We have no idea if he's going to play. I would say no at this point, which is a big deal, right? I mean, we saw Josh Kelly run wild against Miami in week 1. That was certainly not the case in week 2. So I think we're kind of back to this Jekyll and Hyde running game for the LA Chargers. And, I think the good thing is that the run defense has been their biggest weakness for the last, 20 years. I'm not too worried about Minnesota running on this team. There's a reason they brought in Cam Akers. Their running game has been a disaster. But, yeah, I think we get a high-scoring game. Total is, I believe, the highest of the week by a pretty huge margin here. I think it's the highest by like 7.5 points. 54 is the number at DraftKings. I do think we get a shootout. There's no question about that. I don't trust either of these defenses. Khalil Mack has just disappeared. Haven't thought about him all year. Joey Bosa's still himself, but this Chargers defense, man, like for the amount of playmakers in theory that are on this team, I mean, the secondary has been the primary issue, but really all around that they just kind of look like the same team that had these deficiencies a year ago. So I'm with you. I went with the Vikings and staff picks. I don't think I'm going to touch this one in Circa, but I do like the home team here. And the Action Network had a really good stat on Justin Herbert. He's 7-22-2, John, against the second half spread when leading at halftime, which if you've watched any Chargers games in the last 5 years, you're like, yeah, that checks out.
Right. I mean, yeah, he did he like share a water bottle with Phillip Rivers at one point? It passed on. I mean, who knows? But that's jarring. Yeah. The brand is so strong for the Chargers.
Let's hit some of these big spread games. We'll kind of lump these together. We'll talk about which ones we feel the best about, potentially rolling some of those out in the Circa contest. We have the Dallas Cowboys, 12.5-point favorites. They're on the road at Arizona. Of course, the Kansas City Chiefs, also 12.5-point favorites at home against Justin Fields and the Bears. Just a very, very normal week for Chicago, very normal week at Hallis Hall. Ideally, when you're facing the Chiefs, you want one of two things to happen. You either want your defensive coordinator to abruptly resign, or you want your quarterback to criticize the coaching staff. You don't often get both, The Bears got both
on the same day.
On the same day. And, Charles Tillman also works for the FBI. That was the biggest takeaway for me.
That was huge. A well-placed peanut punch on the laptop. But
all right, well, let's talk about these two first, because we have Jags 8.5 over Houston, and we have the Baltimore Ravens as 8-point favorites against the Colts. We'll put those in like the secondary tier of big spreads, but let's focus on the 12.5ers first here. If we had to include one of these in Circa, do you trust the Cowboys more, or do you trust the Chiefs more, or do you trust one of these dogs to cover a big number?
I think the Cardinals seem somehow a little bit more put together than the Bears do right now, but the Chiefs offense hasn't gotten going yet, so I don't know about trusting them with 12.5 points just yet. I think at some point this season the answer would be different, but it almost feels like too easy given how much of a train wreck the Bears are right now. But I think the Cowboys are just going to go in there and demolish it. They have the best defensive player in the league by far in Micah Parsons. They did just lose Trevon Diggs to that ACL injury in practice. That's unfortunate. But I think that, overall, I think that this Cowboys offense is lethal and just starting to get on the rails there. And the defense is just too scary, even without Diggs. So I could see them holding Arizona to 13 points or fewer. And I don't see Arizona holding Dallas really under even 30 points here. So I like the Cowboys among the big spreads.
I think it's a good thing for Dallas that Arizona hung in with the Commanders and, should have beat the Giants last week. It's like, I don't think Arizona's sneaking up on Dallas. They're not sneaking up on another team 3 weeks in a row, right? Everybody's now aware that the Cardinals are this live dog. They're 2-0 against the spread in their first 2 games. I still think they're the least talented team in the league. I still think their coach is a weirdo, but they're playing well. They're playing well so far. And I don't think you're catching the Cowboys off guard. Even if you do, like, the talent discrepancy here is just so huge, especially on defense, right? You lose Trevon Diggs. That's a big deal long-term for the Cowboys. I don't know that it necessarily hurts you against Josh Dobbs and this Cardinals offense. So, I think the Cowboys defensively, this could be a complete disaster game for the Cardinals. And it feels like they're due for one of those. I know it's only 3 weeks into the season, but they've played above their level. Obviously, Dallas has looked like the best team in the league so far. So I'm with you. I mean, it's also hard to imagine Kansas City, not just having its way with the Bears. And, really, it's the Chiefs defense that's carried them so far. So I'm not worried about that aspect of it. Like, I don't think the Bears do anything offensively, but you are right. I mean, this Chiefs offense it's still kind of grinding in first gear. The more that Travis Kelce works his way back into the mix, I think that changes. But I still have a lot of questions about this wide receiver core. And again, they probably aren't going to come up against a Bears team that's without its defensive coordinator and is going to be scrambling on that side of the ball. But I don't know that the Chiefs are capable of just like breezing their way to 35 points like it feels like they've been able to do the last few years.
Right. So, this would be the spot for them to get it rolling, but I'm dubious on it. I'm not quite there yet. So I'm staying away from this one as far as our Circa entry is concerned. And if we were picking between the two big favorites, it would be the Cowboys for me and pretty strongly.
Yeah. Mahomes, by the way, 21-2 straight up as a double-digit favorite, but he's just 9-13-1 against the number. The Chiefs are kind of like the 49ers in these games, and I know the Niners covered a big number last night, but like, they're going to win. There's no real doubt that they're going to pull off the straight-up victory. Like, they're not going to get upset, but you can also see them just kind of knowing exactly what they have to do just to win this game and not overextend themselves. And you can see this being like 23-13 type of game if that offense isn't rolling early on. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think Dallas is the team that I trust more if you want to go with one of those big favorites in week 3. Let's now bunch together the Texans-Jaguars 8.5 point favorites at DraftKings. Numbers down to 8 in some spots. It locked at 9 in Circa. We have the Baltimore Ravens, the 2-0 AFC North leading Baltimore Ravens. They are 8-point favorites at home against the Colts, who I think at this point, John, we got to expect that it's Gardner Minshew.
Right. So that obviously is an issue for Indianapolis. I think Anthony Richardson is no picnic to be playing against. You got to come correct as far as tackling is concerned, which the Ravens are solid with, but certainly you feel better about facing Minshew. One thing to keep in mind for this weekend with some of these mid-Atlantic games, so both Baltimore and Washington specifically, is that there seems to be a storm brewing off the coast. So if we get sloppy conditions here, we could see I feel like the under could be in play for both the Washington and Baltimore games if we get those sloppy conditions there. On Baltimore's end, Justice Hill dinged up. He's got the toe injury. They signed Kenyon Drake. Remember him from last year?
On the
Ravens.
Fan of his. Love that guy.
So he's back in the fold on the practice squad. I think this is going to be a big Gus Edwards game. I think that this is going to be a low scoring game. I think the Ravens win this one, but I think that the conditions here at play prevent me from jumping in on the Ravens covering more than a touchdown.
So Lamar is 2-11 against the number as a favorite of 3 points or more since the start of the 2021 season. That's a concerning trend. Conversely, Gardner Minshew is 1-9 against the spread in his last 10 starts. So
okay.
I do think the conditions favor Baltimore here if it's Minshew, right? Like I think in a normal setting, let's say it's 70 degrees and sunny, I think I'd rather play Anthony Richardson at this point. Obviously, he's the future of the franchise. He's the player with the higher upside. Nobody's questioning that. But I think Gardner Minshew maybe gives his team a higher floor in the short term. Certainly does a little bit more in the passing game. I mean, Richardson's yet to complete a pass of more than 20 yards on the season. It's a different version of the offense. These guys are could not be further apart as far as their style of quarterback play. But if it's windy and it's rainy, to me that favors the Ravens here. That does not favor Gardner Minshew, who is a pass first quarterback.
I remember Minshew in Baltimore in 2020, sloppy conditions, and the Jaguars they didn't do so good that day.
We're not going to talk about that. Let's move on to the Jaguars, who face the Houston Texans. The Jaguars offense has been a disaster. As somebody who's watched every single snap that the Jaguars have played these first 2 weeks, everything looks difficult. They're overcomplicating, 3rd and 2, and you're throwing a quick pass out to the left to Zay Jones and asking him to make 4 defenders miss instead of just running it up the middle with Tank Bigsby or Travis Etienne. I'm hoping that the Jags got scared straight last week against Kansas City. Like I think that was a wake-up call, right? Like they kind of got away with sloppy offense in week 1 against the Colts. That game probably shouldn't have been as close as it was. Some fluky plays let the Colts kind of back into that. They got essentially 14 points from their defense in that game. Houston to me scares me because CJ Stroud looks better than I expected. I think they've been able to kind of hang around after falling behind these last 2 weeks. I think the defense is mildly improved, although they will not have Derek Stingley for this game. That is massive. They have some injuries on the offensive line as well. I do think this is a good spot for Jacksonville because I think it could play out a lot like week 1, where the Jags don't even have to play all that well. As long as they can put together like one competent quarter and put up like 14 or 17 points in that quarter, I think that might be enough. But this number's moved toward the Texans over the last couple of days. I think there are some real concerns about the Jags, who are 9 of 27 on 3rd and 4th downs to begin this season. 1 of 5 on 4th down. They've been disastrous in the red zone. The Jags defense, though, has actually looked okay. That's kind of been the saving grace here. They were able to slow down Kansas City last week. The run defense looked great against Indy in week 1. Maybe that's not saying all that much. You can kind of talk me into this one either way. I wouldn't really feel comfortable playing Houston to cover this, but I'm not 100% convinced that the Jags get it done. That is the way I lean, though.
Yeah, right. So with the Jaguars offense being kind of stuck in the mud so far, it makes you a little bit concerned. I would probably vote against using this on the entry. My lean would be Jacksonville, but yes, to your point, Houston is they're plucky if nothing else, and they're definitely going to test the secondary. I think CJ Stroud is like 3rd in the NFL in pass attempts. The Texans in general are 3rd in the league in plays, so they're going to be like pushing that tempo all game and going to the air. So it'll be like an uncomfortable day for that Jags secondary. But if the pass rush is able to get home whatsoever, then I think Stroud is not good under pressure, and that could kind of unravel things pretty quickly for Houston. So my lean is Jacksonville, but I'm not overly strong on it with it being as high as it is.
Yeah, keep an eye on Laramie Tunsil as well. Did practice on Wednesday, still dealing with a knee injury. He missed week 2 against the Indianapolis Colts. The Texans right now, John, have 7 offensive linemen on IR. 7.
Seems like too many. Can't have that many.
Yeah, not good. I also like Travis Etienne over 68.5 rushing yards. Houston grades out as the worst rush defense in the NFL thus far. So something to keep an eye on there. Where do we want to go next year, John? Let's go back to the top of the board. Titans-Browns. I was surprised this didn't sneak its way into one of the games of the week. I know it's going to be ugly. The total is at 39.5. If it weren't for Patriots-Jets, that would be the lowest of the week. Obviously, the Browns are without Nick Chubb, still holding here as 3.5-point favorites at home.
Yeah, this one is really tough. The Titans had a lot of confidence in them last week. I'm surprised that the public is that in on the Tennessee Titans. I guess everyone was force-fed the Browns game on Monday night and, saw what they saw, and it was ugly, hideous, however you want to put it. It was not good from Cleveland, and the offense, it does not seem fixed. Obviously, Nick Chubb being out is a huge blow to their ability to run the ball. Deshaun Watson looked a lot like what he did last season when he took over for Cleveland. But 3.5, I don't talk me into one side of this one. I really can't quite get a handle of this one.
It's got to be the Titans for me, especially at 3.5. If the number's at 3, I'm probably backing away. I think this could be a 3-point game, right? I think Tennessee, we know the recipe for the Titans. They want to win every game 19-17. And if they don't win 19-17, they're going to lose 19-17. Like I don't see the Browns running away with this, especially without Nick Chubb. I know, running backs don't matter or whatever. Nick Chubb matters for the Cleveland Browns. He is on the list of running backs who absolutely matter in this league. And, I know Jerome Ford looked okay after coming in for Chubb, but it was still night and day. Like before Chubb got injured on Monday night against Pittsburgh, it was like a guaranteed 5-6 yards every single carry for Nick Chubb. And you just hate to see how that ended. You wonder how that affects Cleveland psychologically. All of a sudden, Kareem Hunt is back in the mix. But you mentioned it with Deshaun Watson. Like that, to me, the whole reason that people were kind of in on Cleveland was, all right, well, Deshaun Watson, weird situation last year. He sat out basically the whole year, came back in. Had some bad weather games. He had a bad weather game in week 1. Like, how many games until we just decide, okay, Deshaun Watson, like the version of him from 4 years ago, is not coming back? Because that guy, like you see flashes of it every now and then, but the Browns did not bring in Deshaun Watson to just give them the 15th best quarterback play in the NFL. You brought him in to be a top 7 quarterback in the league, and he looks nothing close to that.
No, and like you said, how much leash can we really give him? Because last year I think you can be justified in flushing how he played, after such a long layoff and everything. But through 2 games, obviously had the good rushing performance in week 1, but it looks real clunky. It looks like a Herculean effort to complete a single pass for Deshaun Watson. So it's been tough. I guess with this one, getting that extra half point, I'll side with Tennessee as well. It's just, again, it's interesting to me that so much of the public money is coming in on Tennessee to that degree, where it's 74% right now over at VSiN.
Yeah, I just think this is going to be a low-scoring game. It's going to be a 3-point game, one way or the other. I'll take the side where we're getting the 3.5. Let's talk about that other game with an extremely low total, 36.5. John, Patriots, Jets, Pats, 2.5-point favorites on the road. This, it historically would be a perfect Bill Belichick setup, right? Like Bill Belichick feasts on quarterbacks like Zach Wilson. He's feasted on Zach Wilson specifically over the last couple of years. But man, the Pats are down bad. Even with a better, healthy quarterback in Mac Jones, I feel like these teams are really comparable, right? And the Patriots have fallen into this lull in the post Tom Brady years. Like I feel the same when I watch the Steelers offense as when I watch the Patriots offense. Like they're moving at 75% speed compared to the rest of the league.
I think the Patriots' longest play from scrimmage on Sunday night against the Dolphins was a Mac Jones scramble.
That sounds right.
That gives you an idea of how explosive this offense is, which is like not even an M80. We're talking sparklers at best. No flimmies or jimmies or what have you to be found in this Patriots offense as far as explosives go. So we're getting the implied defensive struggle here. I think that the Jets defense, as long as there's some ability to extend a drive here and there, so they're not just constantly on the field, the Jets defense, I think that they're going to be able to keep a pretty significant lid on this Patriots offense here. And really, I think this one's going to come down to who wins the turnover battle. And that's probably the Patriots, given who's on or who's in at quarterback for the Jets. So initially, my lean was to go Jets in the points. But the more I think about it, the more I kind of see Zach Wilson screwing this up for the Jets just enough for New England to get its first win of the year and cover this one.
The path for the Jets is getting that running game going. And, obviously they did so in week 1 against the Bills, but it was very much big play dependent, right? It's not like they ran the ball all that well. It was just Breece Hall ripped off a couple of long ones and, Garrett Wilson stole an interception away for a touchdown. Like you can't be living on the margins like that every single week. And I think saying you need to get the running game going is way different than doing it against what's ultimately still a very good Patriots defense. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't like this one either way. Like, would I be shocked if the Jets win this game 13-10 because they have a pick six? No, not at all. But I just can't bet on Zach Wilson. Like that's just kind of a hard and fast rule for me, especially against Bill Belichick. So I'm with you here. If you got to pick one either way, I would take the Patriots. I'd just take them on the money line at -142. You're not losing a whole lot of value there. I mean, this could be a 1 or a 2 point game pretty easily. Where do you come in on the total? 36.5. Is that too low for you?
It's not. Somehow it's not. I think that both of these teams are scoring in the teens here, and we're gonna cruise to a nice under, maybe with like 30 combined points between the two. It's gonna be gross. Give me Patriots 17, Jets 13.
Broncos-Dolphins. Fun game in the early window. Denver 0-2 up against it. We're starting to hear the how hot is Russell Wilson's seat rumors. I'm not a Russell Wilson guy. One of my least favorite players in the league. Always has been. Weird dude. Not a fan. I really don't think he's been their primary issue. They last week against the Commanders, you watched that first half, especially Russell Wilson had a couple vintage Russell Wilson throws. They're finally generating big plays. That was their big issue last year. They just could not get anything down the field. And, Wilson collapsed a little bit in the second half. He's certainly no longer the closer that he once was. But what has happened to this Broncos defense? To me, that's been the far bigger issue.
They lose the defensive coordinator from last year. His name's escaping me, but he had those guys playing at a phenomenal level. It doesn't feel like the talent level on that side of the ball has dropped off much at all. So it is one of those confusing early season trends. Maybe it gets on the right track, but going to Miami, where traditionally this time of the year, the road team is just baking in the sun. It basically like the equivalent of like being a bunch of ants under a microscope on the sidewalk. Like it is going to be preposterously hot for the Broncos on that sideline. So that could be tough for them. They are altitude tested, but are they sea level tested? Who's to say? But coming in at 6.5 earlier in the week, I was pretty strongly like maybe the Dolphins screw around here and don't get it done. Maybe the Broncos show some sort of sign of life going on the road here. As the week has gone on, the more I can see the Dolphins just continuing to kind of establish themselves as one of those scarier teams to play in the AFC. So as much as I wanted to go Broncos in the points coming into this, the more I think on it, the more I think that the Dolphins, despite being extremely public, is the right side.
Yeah, this feels to me like a game where midway through the second quarter, we could look at each other and be like, man, the Dolphins are just wildly out-scheming this Broncos defense, right? I think there is a coaching mismatch here. And I didn't think we would say that coming into the year, but I do think, we kind of look at Sean Payton for what he's done in the past and, it's certainly deserving, probably a future Hall of Fame head coach, but it's a new school versus old school type of matchup. And I trust Mike McDaniel more than I do Sean Payton, especially given what we've seen from this Denver defense. Like if you're allowing Sam Howell and the Commanders to get back into that game and rip off big plays like that Broncos defense did at home last week, I mean, what are you going to do with the guy who's now the odds-on favorite to win the MVP? I do think this Dolphins offense will be in a good spot. The question is, can Denver generate some of those same big plays, that built that lead against the Commanders last week? 6.5 is the number for Miami, total sitting up at 48. The question for me too is, does Jalen Waddle potentially not playing in this game? He's not practiced all week. He's still in concussion protocol as far as we're aware on Friday morning. If he doesn't play, does that really matter to you?
It's an important thing, but it doesn't really push me towards the Broncos on the spread. The Broncos still have to deal with Tyreek Hill, and it seems like Tua and like this ragtag bunch of slot receiver types, your Braxton Berrios or your River Craycrafts of the world, somehow they're getting production out of those guys even. So even if Waddle's not out there, I think that there's enough within this offense and the level at which Tua is playing right now and Tyreek Hill alongside him, that's going to be a lot for Denver to contend with on its own. If Waddle's in, great. That I feel even better about Miami, but I still I'm feeling the Fins here. Fins up.
87.5 is the receiving yards prop for Tyreek Hill, by the way. So I think if Waddle doesn't play, we might be hammering that. Another game with a 6.5 point spread. The Buffalo Bills, 6.5 point favorites on the road at the Commanders. Number is 43.5 on the total at DraftKings. This is a tricky one for me.
Go on.
I would like to feel like I could trust the Buffalo Bills, who have been one of the best teams in the NFL for the last 5 years. They have the cachet here. Washington has anything but the cachet. We've seen two versions of the Bills. We've seen Josh Allen turn the ball over 4 times in week 1. We saw a much more conservative, run-heavy approach last week against Las Vegas. I think that fit the script. We know Vegas can't really do a whole lot on defense. You have a much better defensive line in the Commanders. I don't think Buffalo will be able to pound the ball with James Cook quite as much as they did in week 2. I'm kind of leaning Commanders to cover at home.
Oh, I'm definitely leaning Commanders at home. I mean, I know I continue to kind of be a Bills hater. They to crush the Raiders at home, that's just what you should do if you're the Bills. It doesn't really prove to me that anything is fixed in any sort of significant, meaningful way. They got to go on the road here, and Washington looks credible. You know, like the defense is solid for the most part at most levels. We'll see if their pass rush. I mean, the personnel is really strong, so we'll see if they can actually get it going here. And I think Sam Howell is a gamer. If nothing else, he kind of reminds me of Baker Mayfield a little bit.
Yes.
But less like loud and annoying and whatnot. But you've got Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin crushes zone coverage, and I think that the Bills play a lot of zone. We'll see if the passing game kind of goes out the window as a result of the weather. But Brian Robinson kind of had to eat my words on him last week. He looked very good, I thought, and he seems to be taking over that backfield. And if the weather does play a factor to the extent that I think it might, I think that does not favor the Bills. I don't think that their run defense is all that strong, and I don't think they themselves are able to generate much of a rushing attack with James Cook. So are they going to ask Josh Allen to run it 20 times? I doubt it. I think we're going to see a lot of empty drives from Buffalo here, and I think that not only does Washington cover this one, but I give them a real chance to win this game, actually.
Good stat from the Action Network earlier this week. Ron Rivera, coming off of a win as an underdog. That was the case last week against the Denver Broncos. Rivera is 25-9-1 ATS in the following game after winning as an underdog. So, I think common knowledge would kind of push you toward, maybe there's a bit of a letdown after a win like that, but that has not been the case for Ron Rivera. He's 12-3-1 ATS in that spot over the last 4+ seasons. So I think we lean Commanders on this one. We'll have to decide if that'll be a part of the Circa Million entry. Panthers-Seahawks, John, this is one of only 3 games in the late window. We're back to that frustrating scheduling. We had really nice, everything was parceled out pretty evenly, weeks 1 and week 2. Not the case here. We only have 3 games in the late window. The other 2 are the 12.5 point spreads. So I think we'll be pretty locked in. We'll be pretty locked in on Panthers-Seahawks, and we are expecting Andy Dalton to be under center for Carolina.
Yes. So we get the most competitive game in the afternoon window being a 6.1. In favor of Seattle. Seattle did what it had to do last week, of course, seemed to shake off the week 1 surprising loss to the Rams, go into Detroit, play a good game, get themselves back to even. Carolina, if Bryce Young was playing, I would feel better about siding with Seattle, as crazy as that might sound.
I feel the same way.
Andy Dalton strikes me as like when you're walking on the beach and you see the dead jellyfish and it's like, no, don't touch that. Like it can still sting you. That's kind of what Andy Dalton is at this point, or how I feel about him coming into this weekend. Yes, a dead jellyfish carcass that can still sting.
Yep.
So
good imagery.
Thank you. It just like jellyfish with like a shock of red hair. Oh boy, this is brutal. I want to say Seattle so badly, but I'm staying away from this one. This one just gives the aura of some weird stuff happening. So I'm staying away here. But if I had to pick a side, it would be Seattle.
Yeah, to me, it comes down to can Carolina continue to pressure the passer? That's been something that's been their strength really, and that's really I think what kept them in that game against New Orleans on Monday night. I mean, they're top 10 in the league in terms of how that pass rush grades out. Now, you did lose Shaq Thompson last week. He's done for the year. Both Brian Burns and Justin Houston have been limited throughout this week. Miles Sanders is banged up as well, obviously without Bryce Young. So there are some key pieces that we're worried about here for Carolina. I do lean Seattle at home. I mean, long trip, short week for Carolina. I think there are some advantages here for the Seahawks. I'd feel a heck of a lot better about it if the number was 4.5, even 5.5. But I think you're right. There's going to be at least one quarter here where we look at each other and say, is Andy Dalton about to do this?
There is. I look forward to that, but it's going to make me feel queasy with my Seattle bet on this one. But yeah, I think that the additional context there of this being the short week long trip that pushes it, that kind of seals it. That I'm on Seattle for better or for worse.
Geno Smith 7-11 against the number as a favorite as a starter in his career. Something to consider there. We have the 3 primetime games remaining. We begin with the lone Sunday night game. We get the Steelers again in primetime, John. They are 2.5-point dogs on the road at the Las Vegas Raiders. 43 is the total in that game. We've seen a complete reversal on this line. The look ahead going into week 2 was Steelers -1.5. It moved all the way to Raiders -3. Now sitting at Vegas, giving 2.5 to Pittsburgh.
So does that sound to you like this is just Vegas views them as even and then gives the de facto slight home field advantage to the Raiders, or is this something where last week was concerning enough in the first 2 weeks, really, as far as the offense is concerned for Pittsburgh, to where it's like, yeah, I mean, the Raiders aren't a good team, but at home they should be better than what Pittsburgh has. I mean, you got to be fearful that Pittsburgh, that front seven, TJ Watt is just unbelievable, and Alex Highsmith continues to be someone that is a really impressive presence on the other side opposite him. So that the offensive line is going to be huge for Vegas here if they want to cover this spread and win the game. But I do feel like the Steelers' offense is so stuck in the mud to the point where they're not going to be lighting up the scoreboard even against a bad Raiders defense. So that the number here is 43. I think I probably like the under here more than either side of the spread. If I had to take a spread side, though, I probably am going Pittsburgh in the points, but maybe my faith in Tomlin is a little bit misguided, but at this stage, but under Kenny Pickett, it's not Tomlin's fault. It's Pickett's, but give me the Steelers here. I don't feel awesome about it, but I think that the defense and the special teams will cook something up enough to get Vegas off its game.
You're not wrong to trust Mike Tomlin. 54-31-4 ATS as an underdog. We feel like we go through that stat every single week, and I think there's going to be plenty more games this year where they are in this situation. I tend to side with you as far as like whichever team is getting 2.5 here. I think I would probably just take, and now that's Pittsburgh, so that's the way I lean. I don't trust the Raiders defense. I think they might be the worst unit in this game. The Pittsburgh offense is giving them a run for their money, no question about that. But we have like weakness on weakness, right? Like terrible Pittsburgh offense against terrible Las Vegas defense. I'm looking at PFF grades right now. The Steelers' pass blocking grade is 25.1. Oh, the league average right now, John, is 65.4. Like they are a distant 32nd. I mean, they're like 10 points worse than the 31st ranked pass blocking scheme, which is the New York Giants. And they've been terrible in their own right. Like the Jets have been terrible, and they're way ahead of Pittsburgh. So serious questions about that Pittsburgh offensive line. The run blocking has been terrible as well. But, the Raiders' run defense has been a huge issue for them over the last several years. I don't think they've made the necessary changes. Probably a stay away for me ultimately with Pittsburgh, going across the country out west here. This game is in Las Vegas. But again, if you're getting me 2.5 with the Steelers, that's the way I would lean. This, like that Titans-Browns game, this to me feels like just a classic, like 16-14.
Yeah, I think so as well. So give me the Steelers. It's going to be not going to be the best of the Sunday night menu this year.
Yeah, I'd find something else to watch. I think WNBA playoffs are going on Sunday. Maybe give that a look instead. Let's go to Monday night. Back-to-back weeks with Monday night doubleheaders. We start with Eagles-Buccaneers as the early game. Rams-Bengals is, I guess you could call it the nightcap, but like we said at the top, a lot of overlap between these two games, a lot of confusion, trying to get everything streamed at the same time. This Eagles-Bucs game, a little more complicated than I thought it would be 3 weeks ago when we started to look ahead at the schedule. Eagles hanging on as 5-point favorites on the road. You'll see that number a little bit lower at some books. They're 4.5 at PointsBet, but mostly 5 across the board. How concerned with you are the Eagles? Because I think that's kind of been the storyline that's been brewing through these first 2 weeks is, yeah, they're 2-0, but it hasn't quite looked the same.
Right. So they have some issues in the secondary. Now, is Baker Mayfield the guy to exploit them? I'm not totally sure. But speaking of good stats, John Ewing, who does a lot of data stuff over at BetMGM, had this good stat. Since 2003, when two undefeated teams play each other, the home team is 67, 47, and 3. That's a 60% clip against the spread. And the home underdog in that setup, 67% against the spread. So I thought I liked Tampa going into this one just because Philadelphia hasn't looked quite as dominant thus far, and Tampa Bay has looked a lot livelier than expected coming into the season. I'm in on the Bucs plus 5. I do like the Bucs in this spot. I think that they're going to be able to stay competitive in this one, and I think the Eagles I think eventually they're going to start soaring, but not here.
What worries me is that it's going to be all on the shoulders of Baker Mayfield, because the Eagles' run defense, that's been the one thing that's carried over for them, right? I mean, they're still arguably the best run defense in the NFL. Tampa Bay is still arguably the worst run offense in the NFL.
Yeah, so they don't even care. They don't even care.
We just call that a wash, I guess. We'll just toss that one to Philly and say, all right, you guys are going to stop us, but we're not going to run. Like that's just a lot of responsibility to put on Baker Mayfield, and it almost makes me feel worse that he's played so well through 2 weeks. Like I just feel like that implosion is coming.
That's definitely fair. We've seen it time and time again from him, especially when he's getting too big for his britches. I think being 2-0 when everyone was doubting him, that certainly qualifies. But
I know
as uneasy as it makes me feel, I'm going to side with old Baker here. A couple of Oklahoma Sooner greats going at it between him and Jalen Hurts.
That brings us to our final game on the Week 3 slate. Rams 3-point dogs on the road at Cincinnati. I think we could see some pretty serious line movement, over the next 48 hours leading up to kickoff. Well, really over the next, I can't do math at all. Was it 72 hours? I don't know. The game's on Monday night. That's all we know. But still, Rams 3-point dogs. It feels to me like we're trending toward Joe Burrow not playing. Even if he does play, I think the expectation has to be that he's, one, either pretty limited, or two, going to be at a high risk of at some point tweaking that calf injury again.
I think so as well. I think it would, it would not be good for the public to watch a Jake Browning start, but I think it would also be bad to trot Joe Burrow out there in this spot. You've got the rest of the season ahead of you. I think, interestingly, our buddy over at Fox Sports, Kev Masurgeon, had a tweet where he found Jamar Chase talking about the Burrow injury during training camp. And he's like, if he's good by week 5, that's when we're going to be starting things out and we're going to be feeling good then. So that he almost forecasted that Burrow would be no bueno for the first couple weeks of the season. And, on the Rams side of things, they look a lot. They're like the Bucs. Like, they look so much better than anyone could have thought coming into the season. Puka Nacua, obviously, like one of the big just fantasy and general storylines this year. Matthew Stafford looking close to vintage here, and they got rid of Cam Akers, which I'm sure it seems like him in that locker room was not mixing super well. So he's out of the picture. I like the Rams here. I know that with the idea of everything that's going on with Burrow, it makes it kind of easy to pick the Rams in the points, but at the same time, I have some respect for the Rams now, and McVay is a very good coach. I think he's a better coach than Zach Taylor on the other side of this one, and I'm just going to go with the Rams. Rams up, Rams house, whatever it is that their hashtag is.
I like this one for Circa because I don't think Burrow's playing. And again, like I said, if Burrow does play, he's not going to look like himself. He hasn't looked like himself through the first 2 weeks. I think the calf is in worse shape now than it was going into last week against Baltimore. And to Burrow's credit, I don't think he deserves all the blame for week 2. He certainly looked better than he did in that rust-filled week 1 game. But, I think this is a line that could end up, if Burrow's ruled out, where does this line settle? Is it a pick 'em?
I think a pick 'em. Yeah.
So I think that's, you're doing a little bit of forecasting here, but I think that's pretty significant value when you look ahead as far as who's going to be on the field for Cincinnati. So let's put that one in our back pocket as far as the Circa contest goes. Speaking of, by the way, it is football season at Circa Resort and Casino out in Vegas, featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. 3 levels, 6 pools, and a 143-foot diagonal screen. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. They play every game from college to the pros. You can catch all the action poolside from a variety of seating options. They got cozy day beds. They got private temperature-controlled cabanas, basically anything you could want down at Stadium Swim. Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino. It's open 365 days a year, all sports, all seasons. You can book today at circalasvegas.com. That's circalasvegas.com. Let's keep the Circa talk going here, John. I'm looking at the Circa Survivor results from week 2. A lot of people were on the Bills. That was over 40% of the remaining entries were on the Buffalo Bills. That was no sweat there. Second were the New York Giants. That's where I was last week as well. So I had to sweat the Commanders in week 1, the Giants in week 2, but we made it through. We had a lot of entries go down with the Broncos, a fair amount go down with the Lions as well, but not a ton of carnage compared to some of the weeks that we saw last year in that contest. Let's do a little Survivor talk here real quickly, John. You got a lot of options this week. I think on paper, this would seem like one of the easier weeks, but if you're playing in the Circa contest, you got to be considering holding teams for Thanksgiving, holding teams for those Christmas weeks that operate independently. However, if you're just playing in a traditional Survivor League, you're not worried about some of those bells and whistles in the Circa League. A lot of options on the board. Where do you lean?
My lean is with Dallas. I think that McCarthy and company are just going to go in there and take care of business. I mean, they're going to just let Micah Parsons loose, and it's going to be chaotic for the Cardinals. And, what I think it's important what you said about Arizona earlier, where they're not going to be sneaking up on Dallas the way that, like last year, Houston really gave Dallas everything it could handle late in the season, kind of a sneak up type of game. I don't see that happening this time around. Dallas is rolling. I know that, if you have that Thanksgiving wrinkle, you'd probably want to save the Cowboys potentially, but I want to see one go through. And I know that there's a lot of big spreads that you could also pick from Kansas City, Jacksonville, and Baltimore, all, in worthy considerations, and burning Dallas this early is concerning for later on, but I'm trying to survive this week. I'm trying to use Dallas.
I got the Jags as my current pick right now. That is subject to change prior to Sunday. Obviously, we hope that you just took the 49ers. That was the easy way out last night, although that's another team that you might want to save for later in the season. I just look at this as the best spot that the Jags are going to be in all year. You're home for the Houston Texans, right? You're catching C.J. Stroud. He's yet to throw a pick. At some point, that's going to happen. I know we both have our reservations about the Jags covering a big number. I don't really see them losing this game straight up. I could see them struggling. I could see them, eking out a win in the fourth quarter, but I don't think they're losing this game straight up. I still want to have San Francisco, Dallas, KC, Baltimore. I want all those teams in my back pocket for later in the season. I think if you want to go a little bit off script, the Bills are in consideration. I know we both like the Commanders to cover that game, so I wouldn't take the Bills, but big enough number. I think some people will be on Buffalo. You could consider Miami. You could consider Seattle against Andy Dalton. And then the 3 teams that I have in my sicko tier, if you're just looking to go real off script, the Eagles, the Lions, or the Rams to win straight up.
The Rams is the ultimate sicko pick this week, and that I'm into that. I like where your head's at on that one.
Yeah, there's really no need to do that given all the options, but somebody's going to do it. Every week, I'm always baffled by some of the picks that pop up on that Circa graphic. Let's get into our parlays of the week. We got a potential teaser to throw out as well. We'll do our locks here. I'll throw out a parlay, John. This is via the DraftKings Sportsbook. I like the Rams +3. We're going to tether that to the Cowboys, covered a big number. That was the one we're most confident in. Cowboys -12.5 at Arizona. And I'm throwing the Jags in there as well. We're 2-0 betting the Jags so far in Circa. That number is 8.5. That gets you to +584 at the DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm also not opposed to teasing those. You throw in a 6-point teaser on those same numbers. You get the Rams up to 9. You're shrinking the Cowboys line to 6.5, Jags down to 2.5. I think those are all pretty friendly numbers.
Wow. Yeah, no, the teaser element of that one really gets you where you want to be inside those magic numbers, and getting that 9-point cushion for the Rams too is, I mean, that's some good galaxy braining you done dug there.
Yeah. What about your parlay?
So I got four for y'all.
Whoa, whoa.
I know, right? So this one, it's all spreads. If it comes in, that's plus 1228. So about 12-1 on this sucker. Give me the Commanders plus 6.5. Give me the Vikings -1. Give me the Bucs +5 and the Rams +3. So if Sunday goes well, we got a really, really interesting Monday night potentially. So we got multiple days of entertainment from this parlay. What's not to like?
Hey, I'm not going to push back on any of that. By the way, Ian Rappaport just tweeted Anthony Richardson did not practice today. Gardner Minshew, officially your starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. That number just moved up to 8.5 at the FanDuel Sportsbook. We'll see if we get any more updates there. I think that was probably the anticipated move for the Indianapolis Colts. So that's probably baked into that initial line. Although, like we said, I don't know if it really changes anything. I feel kind of the same way about that game. And if it's rainy, if it's windy in Baltimore, I think that makes me feel even better about the Ravens. Let's lock it up here, John. What is your favorite against the spread pick for week 3?
It is the Washington Commanders plus 6.5 at home. I love that Ron Rivera stat that you threw out there. Mr. Momentum coming off of a good win and keeps it going against the spread. I think the conditions here favor Washington as well. I could see Josh Allen, the turnover monster, coming back out this week a little bit as well. Give me the Commanders.
Okay. I like that one. I'm waffling a little bit here. I really like Tennessee plus 3.5. I just think we see the Titans in this spot like 5 times every year, and it feels like they come through every time. I would definitely not be locking up the Steelers, but I think they're actually in a good spot, catching 2.5 on the road. But I'm going back to the well, John. I am trusting that this Jags offense gets it figured out. I love the matchup, especially the Jags ground game, which does not look good to the Texans' credit so far. But I think the Texans' rush defense is the biggest concern for me in this game. I think the Jags take advantage. I think they win this one by 2 scores. So I'm going to lock up Jacksonville against a big number. They are giving 8.5 to the Texans. I think the Jags cover.
Let's go. Teal curtain.
All right, that'll do it for our week 3 betting preview. You can catch this episode on Thursdays or Fridays every week through the Super Bowl. We're not just cutting this thing off at the end of the regular season. We'll be taking you all the way into February. You can check out our Circa picks. We talk through, kind of our leans, our stayaways every week. You can find that on the RotoWire YouTube channel, the RotoWire socials as well. This has been the week 3 edition of the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast. We hope that you follow us throughout the season. For John McKechnie, I'm Nick Whalen. Best of luck this week.